I'm delighted to take your question.
So I've been asked by the media services people to make sure that when people ask their questions, if they could speak into the microphone. That'd be great. There's a little button that turns it on.
I just wanted to ask a question clarifying and, well, anyway. You seem to, or not, have expressed a dichotomy between software and hardware, in the sense that software needs to be free, software is utility, public good. Hardware, you don't talk about so much. And by hardware, initially I mean related to software, but then generalizable to machines, just any kind of machine. How do you distinguish why should software be free and hardware not?
The 21st century political economy is different from the past economic history of human beings because the economy is full of goods that have zero marginal cost. Traditional microeconomic reasoning depends upon the fact that goods in general have non-zero marginal cost. It takes money to make, move, and sell each one. The availability of freedom for all in the world of bit streams hinges on that zero marginal cost characteristic of digital information. It is because the marginal cost of computer software is zero that all we have to do is cover the fixed costs of its making in order to make it free to everybody. Free not just in the sense of freedom, but also in the sense of beer. Hardware, that is computers and, PDAs, as well as shoes and tables and bricks in the wall and even seats in a Harvard Law School classroom, has non-zero marginal cost. And the traditional microeconomic reasoning still continues to apply to it in pretty much the way that it did for Adam Smith, David Ricardo, or Karl Marx. Reasoning about hardware is, in that sense, like reasoning about the economy we grew up in, and presents all of those questions of how you actually cover the cost of each new unit that the market is designed to help us solve. It's precisely because so much of human knowledge and culture in the 21st century no longer participates in the traditional microeconomics of price asymptotically reaching towards a non-zero marginal cost that we experience so much opportunity to give people what they never had before. And when I speak to you about the difference between hardware and software, I'm implicitly observing the distinction between the traditional non-zero marginal cost economy and the wonderful and weird economics of bit streams, in which the traditional microeconomic theory gives the right answers, but traditional microeconomic theorists don't like what they see when they do the chalk work.
Just to follow up, would you then advocate in other words, because knowledge can be contained in hardware, and also hardware has this additional marginal cost, would you advocate for instance, for every computer to come with a chip diagram so that the knowledge in the hardware is free while you can still collect on the marginal cost? Sure,
it would be a very good idea, and if you watch and see what happens in the 21st century, you'll see more and more manufacturers deciding to do precisely that, because of the value of empowered user innovation, which will drive down their costs of making new and better products all the time. Indeed, for reasons which are as obvious to manufacturers as they are to us, the softwareization of hardware in the 21st century is good for everybody. I'm writing a little bit about that now. I don't mean to plug a book, but wait a little bit, and I'll try and show you what I actually think about all of that in a disciplined sort of way.
I was wondering if the SCO lawsuit might be the first of what could become a series of lawsuits filed ad seriatim or in parallel against free software, and wanted to get your view on two possible types of lawsuits that could follow on the heels of SCO, regardless of whether SCO won or lost. The first would be a lawsuit filed by a company that, to its shock and amazement, found that instead of its programmers hoping for their first house, working on the stuff they were supposed to work on by day, they were in fact spending most of their time on Slashdot and the rest of their time coding free software, and then occasionally staying up late to do something for the old man. If those programmers have signed, which is typical, agreements with their company that says any software they write actually is property of the company, maybe even a work for hire, what is the prospect that a company could then say our code, through that coder, has been worked in to something like Linux and it is now infringing unless we are paid damages?
Right.
The second possible way in which you could see this kind of lawsuit come up would be, oddly enough, through the 35-year termination rule, something that normally would be heralded by people in your position to say, copyright law allows musicians and artists who stupidly signed agreements when they were but small peons without legal assistance with big companies, 35 years later, can take it all back no matter what. They can reset the clock to zero and renegotiate. You might call this the Rod Stewart Salvation Act. And while that might be helpful for the artists, much as the music industry hates it, couldn't that also mean that free software coders who willingly contributed, weren't even blocked by their employers, to contribute to free software movement could, down the line, and 35 years isn't that long in the history of Unix, say, we take it all back?
So those are two very good questions. If I answer each of them fully, I'm going to take too long. Let me concentrate on the first one because I think it's really quite important. What Jonathan's question does is to point out to you that the great legal issues in the freedom of free software have less to do with the license than with the process of assembly by which the original product is put together. One of the legal consequences of the SCO affair is that people are going to start to pay closer attention all the time to how free software products are put together. They're going to discover that what really matters is how you deal with the questions of, for example, possible lurking work-for-hire claims against free software. They're going to discover that in this respect, too, Mr. Stallman was quite prescient. Because they're going to recognize that the way they want their free software put together is the way the Free Software Foundation put it together since now more than 20 years. The way they're going to discover that they really would like to have it is for each individual contribution of code to a free software project, if the guy who contributed the code was working in the industry, they'd really like to have a work-for-hire disclaimer from the guy's employer executed at the same time that the contribution was made. And the filing cabinets of the Free Software Foundation are going to look to them like an oasis in a desert of possible problems. We saw that problem coming. We have tried in our act as stewards over a large part of the free software in the world to deal with it. People are going to want to have that up front for everything that they can possibly, and they're going to be much more reluctant to rely upon software that wasn't assembled in those ways. If you're thinking about working in the law of free software, and gosh, I hope you are, one of the things you might be thinking about working on is the software conservation trusts that are going to be growing up around the economy in the next 5 years. I'll help you make one, or you can come to work in one of mine. We're going to need to spend a lot of time doing work which is associated with trustees. We're going to be spending a lot of time making sure that things are put together and they are built well. And we're going to be doing that on behalf of a third-party insurance industry, which is going to be growing up, is growing up before our very eyes now, which is learning that it really cares how the free software is assembled. When you go to an insurance company and ask for fire insurance on your house, they don't want to know how your house is licensed. They want to know how your house is built. And the questions you are asking about how the free software is built are about to become really important questions. What will abate those lawsuits is that we did our work well, or that we are doing our work well as lawyers assisting programmers to put projects together in defensible ways that protect freedom. Up until the day before yesterday, there were probably 3 lawyers on earth who cared a lot about that, and 2 of them are in this room. There will be more in the near future. I will say quickly about your second question, Jonathan, that the problem presented is a serious problem, but at least from my point of view, a manageable one. And I'm willing to talk more about why, but I think we ought to get more voices into the conversation.